Don't come to my wedding. You're no longer my family, my daughter wrote to me in a message, rejecting me for the sake of her new parents' wealth. I replied, understood. My heart was breaking from the betrayal, so I called one person. 24 hours later, I had 83 missed calls from her and her family. They were panicking, begging me to stop, but it was too late. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Dad, I need $35,000 for the wedding. Emily's voice cut through the evening silence before she'd even removed her designer coat. This is the most important day of my life. I looked up from my evening paper, reading glasses sliding down my nose. My daughter stood in the doorway, car keys still jangling in her manicured hand, already pacing toward my desk. Sweetheart, sit down. Let's talk about this properly. There's nothing to discuss. She spun around, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The Thompsons have already put down deposits. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, everything's arranged. I just need you to cover your share. I set down the paper carefully. 35,000, nearly a quarter of my entire retirement savings. Emily, I can give you 8,000. That's all I can afford on my pension. Her face twisted like I'd slapped her. 8,000? That's pathetic. I walked to my desk, pulled out the bank statements from the bottom drawer. The numbers were clear, printed in stark black and white. Look, honey, this is what I have, after your mother's medical bills, after the funeral expenses. Don't you dare bring Mom into this. Emily knocked the papers from my hands. They scattered across the coffee table, landing beside framed photos of our family, back when we were whole. The Thompsons say a real father would find a way. Richard took out a second mortgage for his son's wedding. Margaret sold her grandmother's jewelry. I'm not Richard Thompson. No, you're not. Her voice cracked with frustration. You're just content with mediocrity, content with this tiny house, this tiny life, this tiny pension. I knelt to gather the scattered statements. My wife's photo smiled up at me from the floor, the woman who'd taught Emily about kindness, about family loyalty. The woman who died believing our daughter would take care of me in my old age. The wedding dress alone cost more than your offering, Emily continued, now standing over me. Do you know how embarrassing it is when they ask about my father's contribution? When I have to explain that my dad used to be somebody, but now he's just... Just what, Emily? She hesitated, but only for a moment. Just a failure. The Thompsons are right about that much. The words hung in the air like smoke. I remained crouched by the coffee table, bank statements in one hand, my wife's photograph in the other. I see. My voice came out steady, quieter than I'd expected. And what do you think your mother would say about this conversation? Emily grabbed her purse from the chair. Mom would want me to be happy. She'd want me to have the wedding I deserve. Would she? But Emily was already at the door. I'll give you a week to figure it out. Find the money, Dad, because I'm not backing down. The door slammed shut. Through the window, I watched her BMW pull out of my driveway, the car the Thompsons had bought her as an engagement gift. I sat back on my heels, still holding my wife's picture. Margaret's eyes seemed different now, sadder somehow, as if she too had heard our daughter's words. The house settled into silence. Bank statements lay scattered around me like fallen leaves, proof of a modest life honestly lived. $8,000. It had seemed like such a generous gift an hour ago. I placed my wife's photo back on the mantel, straightening it carefully. Then I began collecting the papers, one by one, organizing them into neat piles on my desk. $35,000. The Thompsons were right about one thing. I wasn't the kind of father who could write that check. But perhaps it was time they learned exactly what kind of father I really was. The coffee had gone cold while I stared at my phone screen. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the Facebook notification that had just arrived. Emily Martin Thompson shared a post. My thumb hovered over the notification. We'd barely spoken on social media since her mother's funeral, but I'd kept her as a friend anyway. A father's stubborn hope, perhaps. I tapped the screen. Finally found real parents. Thank you, Richard and Margaret, for making dreams come true. Blessed. New family. Wedding planning. The words hit like a physical blow. Real parents. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, clattering against the kitchen table. Below the text, 3 photos loaded slowly on my aging phone. Emily in an elegant bridal salon, surrounded by mirrors and white silk. Margaret Thompson adjusting a veil behind her, both women beaming. Richard Thompson in the background, platinum credit card already in hand, at the register. Likes, 53 comments and counting. Such lucky parents to have you. Your new family is absolutely perfect. The Thompsons are angels. I scrolled through comment after comment, each one twisting the knife deeper. Not one mention of me. Not one acknowledgement that I'd raised this woman for 28 years, held her through nightmares, paid for her college, walked her through her mother's death. Real parents. Who was I then all those years? My hands trembled as I screenshot the post, then the photos, then the comment thread. Professional habit from my banking days. Document everything. I created a new folder on my laptop. Emily, evidence. The banker in me was already working, even as the father in me bled. The dress in the photos cost more than my monthly pension. The salon looked like something from a magazine, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Emily's smile was radiant, her arms wrapped around Margaret like she'd never hugged me that way. But it was the 3rd photo that broke me completely. The 3 of them together, Richard, Margaret, and Emily, posed like a perfect family portrait. Richard's hand on Emily's shoulder, protective and proud. Margaret holding Emily's hands, maternal and warm. Emily between them, looking genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen since before her mother got sick. They looked complete without me. I refreshed the page. 67 comments now, the likes climbing steadily. My daughter's public declaration of abandonment, celebrated by hundreds of strangers who didn't know I existed. The house felt smaller suddenly, filled with photographs of a life Emily had apparently decided didn't matter. Wedding photos of her mother and me, baby pictures, family vacations, all of it reduced to nothing by a social media post and 3 carefully staged photographs. My phone buzzed against the table. A text message from Emily. Dad, did you see my post? The Thompsons wanted everyone to know how grateful I am for real support. Still waiting for your answer about the money. 2 hours passed in a haze of rereading comments and screenshots. The Facebook metrics kept climbing. 200 likes now, nearly 100 comments celebrating my daughter's new family. Each notification felt like another small cut. My phone buzzed again. Emily! I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening the message. After everything this morning had already brought, I wasn't sure I could handle more. Don't come to my wedding. You're not my family anymore. The words hit differently than the Facebook post. Public humiliation was one thing. This was personal execution. Final. Absolute. I read the message 3 times, each pass making it more real. 28 years of fatherhood dismissed in a single text. The child I'd rocked through nightmares, taught to ride a bicycle, walked to her first day of school, gone. My hands trembled as I typed responses. Deleted them. Typed again. Emily, please. We can work this out. Delete. How can you say that to your own father? Delete. After everything I've done for you. Delete. Finally, I typed 2 words. I understand. Sent. The message showed as delivered, then read. No response came. Emily had moved on, probably back to her wedding planning with her new parents. I walked to the living room, legs unsteady. The photo albums sat on the bottom shelf where they'd been since Margaret's funeral. I pulled out the oldest one, leather-bound and worn at the edges. Our wedding day, Margaret in white lace, me in a rented tuxedo that was slightly too large. We looked impossibly young, impossibly happy. She'd made me promise that day to always protect our future children, to be the kind of father who never let them down. I turned the page, Emily as a newborn, tiny fists pressed against her face. Me holding her in the hospital chair, looking terrified and amazed. Margaret used to joke that I'd counted Emily's fingers and toes 50 times that first day. More pages. Emily's first steps, tottering between Margaret and me in our old apartment. Her first day of kindergarten, pigtails and a backpack bigger than she was. Birthday parties where I'd spent weeks building elaborate decorations. Christmas mornings where Emily would drag us from bed at dawn. School plays where she'd find my face in the audience and wave. High school graduation, where she'd hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. College move-in day, when she'd cried and made me promise to call every week. When had it changed? When had I become disposable? I closed the album and set it aside. Through the window, neighbors were living their ordinary Saturday mornings, walking dogs, checking mail, washing cars, normal families doing normal things. My phone remained silent. Emily wasn't coming back from this decision. The Thompsons had won completely. But as I sat there surrounded by 28 years of family memories, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and deep, but alongside it grew something else, a cold, methodical anger that felt familiar from my banking days. "All right, Emily," I said aloud to the empty house. "Let's see how real your new parents actually are." Hours passed in methodical planning. I'd moved to my home office, the same space where I'd handled business calls for 30 years. The familiar environment brought back that old analytical mindset, the one that had caught embezzlers and fraudulent loan applications when others missed them. My address book sat open on the desk, pages yellowed with age. Stephen Clark, Private Investigations. I'd written his number carefully in blue ink 5 years ago when he'd left the bank to start his own firm. "Call if you ever need anything," he'd said at his farewell party. The business card was tucked between the pages, professional gray with black lettering, discreet but confident. Stephen had always been thorough, methodical, the kind of man who found answers others couldn't. I dialed his number. "Stephen Clark, Investigations." "Stephen, it's Bob Martin." Pause. Bob Martin from First National. It's been years. "Good evening, Stephen. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. What can I do for you, Bob? This is unexpected." I settled back in my desk chair, choosing my words carefully. "I need some information about Richard and Margaret Thompson here in Spokane. Complete background check." Another pause. Longer this time. "What's going on, Bob? This isn't like you. Let's just say I want to make sure I can trust some new relatives." "Ah." Stephen's tone shifted to business mode. "I see. What kind of scope are we talking about?" "Everything. Financial background, business practices, property holdings, legal issues. They own Thompson's Fine Dining downtown. I want to know exactly who these people are." "That's comprehensive work, Bob. I'll need about a week for thorough results. My rate for full background investigations is $3,000. But for an old colleague—" He paused, thinking. $2,000 advance. The rest on completion. $2,000. A quarter of what Emily had demanded for her wedding. It felt appropriate somehow. That works. What do you need from me? "Full names, addresses if you have them, business names. I'll start with public records, corporate filings, tax liens, anything that shows up in the system. Is there anything specific you're looking for?" I thought about Emily's BMW, the expensive bridal salon, the easy way Richard had pulled out that platinum credit card. I'm particularly interested in their business practices, how they make their money, whether everything is legitimate. Understood. The kind of deep dive that looks at cash flow patterns, vendor relationships, tax compliance. Exactly. The banking terminology felt natural, comfortable. This was what I did best, following money trails, spotting inconsistencies. I'll send you my contract and payment information by email tonight. Should have preliminary results by next Friday. Complete report the week after. Perfect. I opened my laptop, checking my online banking. The $2,000 would barely dent my savings, and if Stephen found what I suspected he might, it would be worth every penny. "Bob, can I ask what brought this on? You sound different." I stared at the framed photo on my desk. Emily's high school graduation, both of us smiling. It felt like looking at strangers now. Sometimes you discover people aren't who you thought they were, Stephen, and sometimes you need to know exactly who you're dealing with. "Fair enough. I'll be in touch soon." The line went dead. I set the phone down and opened my email, waiting for Stephen's contract. For the first time since Emily's visit yesterday, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. My phone buzzed, a new message from Emily. 3 days of silence had an interesting effect. My phone showed 83 missed calls. I'd kept a careful record in my old banking ledger. 17 from Emily the first day, 15 the second, 15 more today. Richard Thompson had called 23 times, his messages growing shorter and more demanding. Even Jason had called 13 times, his voice increasingly uncomfortable as he tried to mediate a situation he clearly didn't understand. Day one had started with curiosity. Emily's first voicemail came at 7 a.m. Dad, maybe I was too harsh yesterday. We should talk about this properly. Call me back when you get this. Her tone was testing, probing, still entitled, but with a crack of uncertainty. By evening, she'd called 6 more times. Day two brought frustration. Richard Thompson's voice boomed through my speaker during my morning coffee. Mr. Martin, we need to talk like men. This silent treatment isn't helping anyone. Emily's upset, and frankly, so are we. 27 calls that day. I'd mowed the lawn while my phone vibrated frantically on the kitchen counter, muted but insistent. Each buzz felt like a small victory. Today was different. Desperation had crept into their voices. Emily's latest message, left an hour ago while I was grocery shopping. Dad, please call me back. I want you to come to the wedding. I'm sorry, okay? I'm really, really sorry. We can work this out. The Thompsons think maybe we all said things we didn't mean. Her voice broke on the last sentence. I sat at my kitchen table with the ledger open, documenting each call with banker precision. Time received, duration, caller, emotional tone. The pattern was clear. Morning calls showed hope. Afternoon calls carried frustration. Evening calls revealed desperation. What fascinated me most was how quickly they'd cracked. 3 days. 72 hours of silence. And my daughter, who'd called me a failure, was now begging for my attention. The house had never been more peaceful. I'd read 2 entire books, organized my closets, and prepared meals without interruption. My phone sat on silent, notifications piling up like snow against a window. Sometimes I'd count them during commercial breaks, watching the numbers climb. Richard's calls followed a predictable pattern, authoritative demands escalating to barely contained anger. His businessman facade was slipping with each unreturned message. Yesterday's voicemail had lasted 30 seconds. We're trying to be reasonable here, Martin, but this childish behavior needs to stop. Jason's attempts were the most pathetic. Clearly coached by Emily and pressured by his parents, his messages grew shorter as his discomfort increased. Hi, Mr. Martin. It's Jason. Emily wanted me to, could you please call her back? She's really worried. The spreadsheet in my laptop showed the progression beautifully. Day 1, confusion. Day 2, frustration. Day 3, panic. Each phase documented with the methodical care I'd once applied to quarterly audits. My wife's photo watched from the mantel as I worked. Margaret would have been fascinated by this psychological chess game. She'd always said I was too soft with Emily, too willing to give in. Sometimes, she'd whispered during one of Emily's teenage tantrums, the best response is no response at all. 3 days ago, I'd been the desperate one, begging Emily to reconsider, offering what little I had. Now the roles had reversed completely. They needed something from me. Acknowledgement, forgiveness, simply proof that I still existed in their world. Stephen's preliminary report was due tomorrow, but honestly I was starting to wonder if I'd need it. Emily was unraveling beautifully all on her own. My phone buzzed again. Emily, call number 48. This time, I almost smiled. Riverside Coffee sat half empty on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly what I'd hoped for when choosing this location. Stephen had picked a corner table away from the counter, his briefcase positioned carefully beside his chair. Professional as always. Bob, I have very interesting information for you. I settled into the opposite chair, notebook ready. I hope it was worth the investment. Stephen opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. Worth it? Bob, they're evading at least $400,000 in taxes over the past 3 years. The number hung between us. $400,000. Emily's wedding budget was a rounding error compared to what her new parents were stealing. Tell me more. Richard and Margaret Thompson run a sophisticated money laundering operation through their restaurant. Stephen slid the first document across the table. Look at this. Monthly deposits from catering services that don't exist. I put on my reading glasses, examining the bank statement. Cleaned photocopies, professionally obtained. $53,000 deposited on March 3rd from Heritage Wedding Catering. Another $47,000 on February 15th from Platinum Events Catering. I called these companies, Stephen continued. Half don't exist. The other half never worked with the Thompsons. My banking training kicked in automatically. What's their declared income versus actual lifestyle? Officially, 80,000 annually from the restaurant. Unofficially, Stephen pulled out property records. $2.3 million mansion purchased last year. BMW payments that exceed their monthly declared income. Country club memberships costing more than most people make. I flipped through the documents methodically. Tax returns showing minimal profits, while bank statements revealed consistent large deposits. The discrepancy was staggering and legally devastating. The restaurant's legitimate revenue barely covers operating costs, Stephen explained. Everything else comes from phantom catering jobs, inflated supply invoices, and cash payments from unnamed sources. Have you documented the pattern? 3 years of records. Watch this progression. Stephen laid out bank statements chronologically, starting small, 5,000 here, 8,000 there. By last year, they're processing 60,000 monthly in fake invoicing. Each page told a story my trained eye could read perfectly. Structured deposits designed to avoid reporting requirements. Invoice dates that didn't correspond to actual events. Client names that led to disconnected phone numbers. They're not just stealing from the government, I said, connecting the dots. This level of sophistication suggests they're cleaning money for other people too. Exactly what I thought. Former banker's instincts, right? Stephen grinned. That's why they can afford Emily's wedding demands so easily. It's not their money they're spending. I set down the documents and leaned back. Emily had chosen criminals over her own father, people whose generosity came from theft and fraud. The irony was almost perfect. How solid is this evidence? Solid enough for the IRS, the State Revenue Department, and probably federal investigators. I've documented everything through legal channels, public records, legitimate business inquiries, nothing that can't be used in court. Stephen pulled out a final folder. There's more if you want it. Personal banking records will take another week, but I can trace exactly how they're moving money between accounts. Do it. I didn't hesitate. The additional cost was irrelevant now. As Stephen packed the documents, I made careful notes in my own ledger, account numbers, dates, amounts. The same methodical record-keeping that had built my banking career would now destroy Emily's new family. Bob, can I ask what you're planning to do with this information? I closed my notebook and looked across the caf. Normal people living normal lives, paying their taxes, following the law, unlike the Thompsons who'd bought my daughter's loyalty with stolen money. I'm going to make sure the right people see these documents, Stephen. And your family situation? Let's just say some relationships need to be examined very carefully. Stephen nodded, understanding the boundaries. He'd given me exactly what I needed, proof that Emily's real parents were criminals. My phone buzzed. Emily again, call number 49. This time, I answered. 3 days after my meeting with Stephen, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Emily stood on my front steps, clutching a bouquet of white roses, my late wife's favorite. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual perfect makeup smudged. She looked exactly like someone who'd spent days calling a phone that never answered. I opened the door. Dad, I know I hurt you. But you understand. Weddings are stressful. Of course, sweetheart, I understand. She blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. The flowers trembled slightly in her hands. May I come in? I stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. Let me put those in water for you. As I arranged the roses in Margaret's crystal vase, Emily perched on the edge of the sofa, like a nervous bird. Her eyes darted around the familiar room, taking in the family photos that contradicted her Facebook declaration about real parents. I'll make us some tea, I said, moving toward the kitchen. Dad, wait, her voice cracked slightly. About what I posted on Facebook. People misunderstood. When I said real parents, I didn't mean. I meant supportive, you know? People who could help with the wedding. I filled the kettle methodically, of course. The message I sent was harsh, too. I was angry, and the Thompsons were. They were so disappointed that we were fighting. They said families should stick together. Wise advice. Emily followed me into the kitchen, hovering while I selected cups and tea bags. Earl Grey for both of us. Another small reminder of our shared history. So you'll come to the wedding? The Thompsons really want to get to know you better. Richard says he'd like to have a proper conversation man to man. I'm sure he would. We'll see. Dad, I know 35,000 was a lot to ask, but you have to understand. This is my dream wedding. The Thompsons have been so generous, and they wanted me to have everything perfect. She paused, watching me pour the hot water. They're not trying to replace you. They're able to do things you can't. Like what, exactly? Well, they understand the restaurant business. They know important people. They can open doors for Jason and me that... She trailed off, realizing how that sounded. That I can't? That's not what I meant. But we both knew it was. I carried the tea tray to the living room, letting her follow. She sat across from me, cradling her cup like a prayer offering. The wedding's in 6 weeks, she said quietly. April 8th. The venue is gorgeous. Thompson's Fine Dining's private event space. Richard's closing the whole restaurant for us. How generous of him. Dad, please don't be like this. I'm trying to apologize. I'm trying to make things right. I sipped my tea, studying my daughter's face. She looked genuinely distressed, genuinely sorry, but underneath the apology was still that familiar entitlement, that assumption that her needs should come first. You called me 49 times, I said finally. She flushed. I was worried. You never ignore my calls. Maybe I should have ignored them more often. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, sweetheart. Tell me more about the wedding plans. Emily brightened, apparently taking this as encouragement. The ceremony's at 4, reception immediately after. We're expecting about 200 guests. The Thompsons know so many people. Business associates, country club friends. It's going to be beautiful. I nodded, making appropriate sounds while she described flowers and music and menu choices that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, all funded by tax evasion and money laundering, though she had no idea. So you'll walk me down the aisle? She asked finally, her voice small and hopeful. I set down my teacup and looked at her directly. Emily, do you remember what your mother used to say about family? She said a lot of things. She said family isn't about who can give you the most expensive things. It's about who shows up when things get difficult. Emily's face tightened. The Thompsons have shown up for me. Have they? Yes, they've given me everything you couldn't. They've treated me like their own daughter. Is that what you want? To be their daughter instead of mine? I want both. The words burst out of her raw and frustrated. Why can't I have both? I stood up, collecting the empty teacups. Because, sweetheart, some choices have consequences. She followed me back to the kitchen, hovering anxiously while I rinsed the dishes. Dad, the Thompsons want to invite you for dinner. Tomorrow night. They want to clear the air. Start fresh. Richard thinks maybe we all got off on the wrong foot. I dried my hands carefully, considering. Dinner with the Thompsons. A chance to see the criminals up close, to observe how they operated, to study my enemies before I destroyed them. I dried my hands carefully, considering. Dinner with the Thompsons. A chance to see the criminals up close, to observe how they operated, to study my enemies before I destroyed them. What time? I asked. Thompson's Fine Dining occupied a corner building downtown, all glass and steel with valet parking. I'd driven past it countless times, never imagining I'd enter as the father of a family that owned it through tax fraud. Emily waited by the hostess stand, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Dad, you came. They're already here. Table 12, Richard's favorite spot. The dining room gleamed with polished wood and crystal. Expensive art, clientele and clothes that cost more than my monthly pension, the kind of place where money talks in whispers. Richard Thompson rose as we approached, extending his hand with practiced confidence. Robert, welcome to our little place. Little place. The restaurant probably cost more than my house. Margaret remained seated, offering her hand like royalty. We're so glad you could join us. Emily's been worried sick about this family situation. I took the offered chair, noting the prime location with clear views of the entire restaurant. Perfect for observing operations. Well, we can't have Emily worried. This is her special time. Exactly, Richard signaled the waiter. Nothing but the best for our girl. Wine? I've got a 2018 Bordeaux that'll change your life. $200 wine. I nodded while mentally calculating how many fake invoices it took to afford such casual luxury. Emily beamed as Richard ordered for the table. Margaret launched into wedding plans, each element more expensive than the last. The flowers alone are 12,000, she said casually, but Emily deserves perfection. She certainly does, I agreed, watching a man at the next table slide an envelope to a woman who pocketed it without looking. No receipt, no record. Classic money laundering. Of course, Richard leaned back. We understand your limitations. Fixed income, modest savings. That's why we stepped in. Emily needed real support. Real support from criminals. I appreciate your generosity. Emily's always dreamed of a beautiful life. And she'll have it. Margaret's voice carried that tone wealthy women used for charity cases. We can give her things that others simply can't. I sipped the expensive wine, watching staff exchange documents at various tables. Cash changed hands. Envelopes disappeared, and the Thompsons presided over it all with casual authority. Business seems good, I observed. Outstanding. Richard's chest puffed with pride. We've expanded into catering, private events. The profit margins are incredible. Because you don't report half of it, I thought, discreetly photographing an invoice someone had left on the table behind Richard, Heritage Wedding. Catering, one of Stephen's phantom companies. Emily chattered about honeymoon plans while I documented evidence. A stack of cash disappeared into a server's apron. A businessman paid with multiple credit cards and an envelope of currency. Robert, Margaret interrupted, we want you to know, Emily is family now, our daughter in every way that matters. You've been very kind to her. Kind? Richard laughed. We've given her a future. Country club membership, social connections, business opportunities, things a pension simply can't provide. The condescension was breathtaking. Two criminals lecturing me about providing for my daughter with stolen money. You're right, I said humbly. I couldn't give her what you can. Emily squeezed my hand, radiant with happiness. If only she knew she was celebrating with tax evaders and money launderers. Richard regaled us with business stories, each revealing more criminal activity. Phantom employees, inflated expenses, cash customers who paid premium prices for services that didn't exist. The secret, Richard winked, is understanding cash flow, maximizing income streams while minimizing overhead. Minimizing taxes, he meant. My phone buzzed as I photographed another transaction. Stephen, probably with investigation updates. Emily tells me the wedding's at your private event space. Our crown jewel, Margaret gestured toward the back. Seats 300, full catering kitchen. We've hosted senators, judges, important people. Important people dining in a money laundering operation. I'd love to see it sometime. Absolutely. We should have you over again soon. Get to know each other properly. More opportunities to observe their criminal enterprise. I'd like that very much. As dessert arrived, I counted 17 suspicious transactions. The restaurant operated like a financial services company, disguised as fine dining. Emily leaned against my shoulder, wine making her sentimental. I'm so happy. We're all family now. Family, if she only knew. Richard raised his glass. To family. To new beginnings. To understanding what really matters. I raised my glass, meeting his eyes, to getting exactly what we deserve. The week that followed passed in methodical preparation. I'd cleared my dining room table, transforming it into a command center. Stephen's investigation files sat in neat stacks beside my own photographs from the restaurant. Everything organized with the same precision I'd once applied to quarterly audits. Stephen arrived Tuesday morning with his final report, a thick manila envelope that felt heavy with consequences. Bob, this is enough to put them away for 5 years minimum. I opened the folder, scanning pages of documented fraud, bank records, fake invoices, tax returns that bore no resemblance to their actual lifestyle. Professional, thorough, devastating. I don't want them in prison, Stephen. I want Emily to see the truth. He raised an eyebrow. That's not what I expected. Prison would be too private, too clean. I set down the documents. Emily chose them over me because of their money. She should know where that money really comes from. Stephen packed his briefcase. Our professional relationship concluded. I walked him to the door, then returned to my war room. The next 3 days blurred together in careful preparation. I digitized every document, creating backup copies on 3 different devices. The banker and me insisted on redundancy. If one system failed, The others would preserve the evidence. Thursday morning, I drafted my complaint to the IRS. 12 pages of detailed allegations, supported by photographs and financial records. I'd written similar reports during my banking career, but never with such personal satisfaction. Richard and Margaret Thompson have systematically evaded federal taxes through falsified business records and money laundering operations, I typed. The enclosed evidence documents over $400,000 in unreported income spanning 3 years. I printed 3 copies, sealing them in separate envelopes for different federal agencies: the IRS, the State Revenue Department, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. A coordinated attack that would hit them from multiple directions. But the federal investigation would take months to develop. Emily's wedding was in 5 days. Friday evening, I assembled my special wedding gift, a leather portfolio containing copies of every incriminating document, arranged chronologically to tell the story of systematic fraud: bank statements, fake invoices, restaurant photographs, tax returns, a complete picture of criminal enterprise. On the cover page, I wrote a simple note: for Emily, so you can see who your real parents actually are. Love, Dad. Saturday, I drove to 3 different post offices, mailing the federal complaints from separate locations. Anonymous tips that would trigger investigations within weeks. By the time the Thompsons realized what was happening, their financial empire would be under federal scrutiny. Sunday morning brought a call from Emily. Dad, I'm so excited you'll be there Tuesday. Margaret's been planning something special. She wants to give a speech about family and how grateful they are to have you as part of theirs. Margaret Thompson giving a speech about family values while running a criminal enterprise. The irony was perfect. That sounds lovely, honey. And Dad, I know I was awful to you before, but having dinner with them made me realize we can all be family together. The Thompsons really care about making you feel included. I'm looking forward to it. After hanging up, I returned to my dining room table. The portfolio sat ready, waiting for the perfect moment. Emily's wedding day would become the Thompson family's day of reckoning. I opened my laptop and composed one final email, scheduling it to send automatically if I didn't cancel it within 72 hours. My insurance policy, a complete evidence summary, directed to the local newspaper's investigative reporter. The subject line read, Local Restaurant Owner's $1 Million Tax Fraud Scheme. Monday passed quietly. I pressed my best suit, polished my shoes, and reviewed the evidence portfolio one final time. Everything was perfect, chronological, comprehensive, undeniable. That evening, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. See you tomorrow, Dad. Can't wait for you to be part of our family celebration. I set the phone aside and looked at the portfolio on my dresser. Tomorrow, Emily would discover what kind of family she'd really chosen. Tomorrow, the Thompsons would get exactly what they deserved. The ceremony hall gleamed with white roses and crystal chandeliers. $12,000 worth of arrangements, more than I'd offered Emily for her entire wedding. The venue was perfect, elegant, expensive. Everything the Thompsons wanted their money to buy. Emily appeared in the doorway, radiant in silk and lace. Her face lit up when she saw me. Dad, you're here! She rushed over, her dress rustling like expensive paper. Behind her, Margaret Thompson supervised photographers with the authority of someone who'd paid for everything. I have something for you, I said, reaching into my jacket. The sealed envelope felt warm against my fingers. A special wedding gift. Make sure you open it tonight, when you have time to read it properly. Emily took the envelope, eyes bright with curiosity. What is it? Something important, something that will help you understand your new family better. She hugged me, still clutching the envelope. Thank you for being here, Dad. Having you accept the Thompsons means everything to me. I watched her tuck the envelope into her bridal bag, next to her lipstick and tissues. Such a small package to contain such explosive information. Guests began filing in. 200 people in their finest clothes, all here to witness Thompson generosity. I recognized faces from the restaurant, business associates who'd probably participated in money laundering without knowing it. Richard Thompson appeared beside me in his designer tuxedo. Robert, Emily looks beautiful, doesn't she? She does indeed. We spared no expense today. Only the best for our girl. He gestured toward the elaborate arrangements. Cost more than most people make in a year, but Emily deserves perfection. Perfection bought with stolen money. Margaret joined us, jewelry sparkling. Robert, we've seated you in the third row, family section, but we wanted everyone to see Emily clearly. Third row, behind Thompson relatives and business partners. My role as father reduced to honored guest status. The musicians began playing. I found my assigned spot, noting how the Thompsons had arranged everything to showcase their importance. They sat in the front row like royalty, accepting congratulations from guests who praised their generosity. Such a beautiful wedding, the woman beside me whispered. The Thompsons have been so good to that girl. Emily appeared at the back of the hall, glowing with happiness. No traditional father-daughter walk. Richard Thompson had claimed that honor too, walking beside her as the man who'd made this day possible. I watched my daughter float down the aisle on the arm of a tax-evading criminal, her face radiant with joy. The ceremony began with elaborate readings about love and family values. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing devoted mother figure. Richard beamed with patriarchal pride, accepting whispered thanks from guests. They've been like parents to her, someone behind me murmured. So generous. I smiled and nodded, playing my part perfectly. The humble father, grateful for Thompson kindness. Jason recited his vows with nervous sincerity, overwhelmed by the wedding's grandeur. Emily responded with teary gratitude, thanking the Thompsons for making dreams come true. The photographer captured everything, the luxury, the emotion, the Thompson triumph. Perfect documentation of their victory over the modest bank auditor, who couldn't provide for his daughter. As the ceremony concluded, guests rose in applause. Rice and flower petals filled the air while the couple kissed. Emily clutched her bridal bag tightly, the sealed envelope safely inside. Margaret approached me, all gracious smiles. Robert, we're so pleased you could share this moment. Emily needed her father here to make it complete. Thank you for including me. We're family now. We'd love to have you for dinner again soon. Share more about our business, our success. You might find it educational. Educational indeed. I'd like that very much. The receiving line formed. I watched Emily accept congratulations while clutching her bag. Every few minutes she'd pat it gently, making sure my gift remained safe. In 6 hours she'd be home, opening that envelope, reading about tax evasion and money laundering, learning exactly what kind of family values her real parents represented. The Thompsons posed for photographs, arms around Emily like proud parents. Flashbulbs captured their moment of absolute triumph. I checked my watch. Hours of celebration remained before Emily discovered the truth. But discovery was inevitable. The envelope sat in her bag like a ticking bomb, counting down to the moment when everything would change. The Davenport Grand Ballroom sparkled with crystal and candlelight. Emily and Jason sat at the head table, surrounded by wedding gifts. The reception had lasted 4 hours. Dinner, toasts, dancing, everything the Thompsons had orchestrated to perfection. I watched from my assigned table as Emily finally reached for her bridal bag. The sealed envelope emerged, pristine white against her silk gloves. What's this, Dad? She called across the ballroom, holding up my gift. Open it, sweetheart. It's something special. She broke the seal carefully, unfolding the cover letter first. I'd written it simply. Dear daughter, meet your real parents. Emily's smile faded as she read. Her eyes moved to the documents beneath. Bank statements, tax returns, money laundering evidence, page after page of Thompson crimes, professionally documented. The color drained from her face. Emily? Jason leaned over, concerned. What is it? She handed him the letter, then spread the financial documents across the white tablecloth. Bank records showing unreported income. Fake catering invoices, tax returns claiming poverty while living in luxury. Margaret Thompson noticed the commotion first. Emily, dear, what's wrong? Emily looked up, documents clutched in trembling hands. Is this true? Are you really stealing money? The ballroom began to quiet. Nearby guests turned toward the head table, sensing drama. Richard Thompson stood quickly, face flushing red. That's all lies. Your father's just jealous because we could give you what he couldn't. Jealous? I rose from my seat, walking toward the head table. Every eye in the ballroom followed me. No, Richard. I just wanted my daughter to know the truth about her new parents. Margaret grabbed for the documents, but too late. Guests at nearby tables had already seen them, phones appearing to photograph the evidence. $400,000 in tax evasion, I announced to the room. Money laundering through fake catering services. Your wedding was paid for with stolen money, Emily. Emily stared at the documents, then at the Thompsons, then back at the evidence. The flowers, the venue, everything? All of it, I confirmed. Funded by criminal activity. Richard's face turned purple. You bitter old man? You're trying to ruin your own daughter's wedding? I'm trying to save her from criminals. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Guests pulled out phones, photographing the documents Emily held. The scandal was spreading in real time, captured by 200 witnesses. Margaret tried desperately to control damage. Please, everyone, this is a misunderstanding. The IRS doesn't think so, I interrupted. I filed formal complaints 3 days ago. The federal investigation starts Monday. Emily dropped the documents, covering her face. All this time, all your generosity, it was stolen money? Emily, you have to understand, Richard began. I understand perfectly. Her voice was hollow, devastated. You bought me with money you stole from other people. The wedding photographer captured everything. Their panic, Emily's breakdown, scattered evidence across the head table. Perfect documentation of their public destruction. Guests began standing, some approaching for closer looks, others backing away as if witnessing a crime scene. The elegant reception had transformed into a scandal. Jason sat frozen, staring at his new in-laws. My parents? They're really tax evaders and money launderers, I confirmed. The restaurant is a front for washing illegal cash. Margaret made one final desperate attempt. Robert, surely we can discuss this privately. Like you discussed publicly replacing me as Emily's father. I smiled coldly. No, Margaret. This conversation happens here, in front of everyone who witnessed your triumph. Emily finally looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Dad, I'm so sorry. I said such terrible things to you. You were manipulated by criminals, sweetheart. You couldn't have known. Richard Thompson, who'd walked my daughter down the aisle, stood exposed as a common thief. Margaret, who'd played loving mother figure, was revealed as his partner in crime. The wedding guests, their friends, business associates, social connections, had become witnesses to their complete downfall. Emily gathered the scattered documents. What happens now? Now, I said, watching the Thompsons' faces crumble, justice happens. The ballroom buzzed with conversation, phones, and reputations being destroyed in real time. The envelope had opened, the bomb had exploded, and the Thompsons were getting exactly what they deserved. 5 days later, Emily stood on my doorstep with tears streaming down her face and her arms full of expensive gifts. Dad, I'm so sorry. I was a terrible daughter. She collapsed into the living room chair, still in her designer clothes, but looking smaller somehow. The diamond earrings Margaret had given her caught the afternoon light, sparkling like guilt made manifest. You're my daughter, Emily, and I'll always love you. But now you know the difference between people who really love you and people who just want to use you. She nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue. I brought everything back. All the jewelry, the clothes, the purse. I can't keep any of it now that I know where it came from. I watched her unpack the expensive items onto my coffee table. Thousands of dollars worth of gifts, each one a small bribe to buy her loyalty. The diamond bracelet Richard had presented so proudly. The designer handbag Margaret had insisted she needed. All of it tainted now by the truth. How can you forgive me after everything I said to you? Because real love doesn't have a price tag, and that's something the Thompsons will never understand. Emily picked up one of the family photos from the mantel. Her mother holding her as a baby. I wish Mom were here. She would have seen through them, wouldn't she? Your mother always said the most expensive gifts often come with the highest cost. The IRS came to their restaurant yesterday, Emily said quietly. Closed it down, took boxes of records. Richard tried calling me, but I couldn't talk to them. I nodded. The federal investigation I'd triggered was moving faster than expected. Good. They'll face justice through proper channels now. That's how it should be. Emily set down the photo and looked at me directly. You could have just told me they were criminals. Why did you wait? Why did you let me go through with the wedding? Would you have believed me without proof? Or would you have thought your bitter father was just trying to ruin your happiness? She was quiet for a long moment. I would have chosen them. Even if you'd told me the truth, I would have chosen them because of their money. And now? Now I understand why you always said the most important things can't be bought. We spent the afternoon going through old photo albums, pictures of Emily's childhood, family vacations on modest budgets, birthday parties in our small backyard. None of it glamorous, but all of it real. I want to have a proper blessing, Emily said as we closed the last album. Just us. Maybe a few real friends. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just honest. I'd like that. Jason's devastated about his parents. He never suspected anything. We're thinking of moving away from Spokane, starting fresh somewhere. That might be wise. Emily gathered up the expensive gifts, placing them carefully in shopping bags. I'll donate these to charity. Someone might as well get some good out of them. Your mother would be proud of that decision. As she prepared to leave, Emily hugged me tightly. I'm sorry it took criminals and a federal investigation for me to realize what I already had. The important thing is that you understand now. Will you walk me down the aisle at the real ceremony? I'd be honored. After she left, I sat in my living room, surrounded by family photos and memories. The expensive gifts were gone, replaced by something much more valuable. My daughter's love and respect, earned honestly this time. My phone rang. Stephen Clark. Bob, you've been watching the news? Some of it. Thompson's fine dining is finished. The IRS found enough evidence to prosecute for tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud. Richard and Margaret are looking at serious prison time. Good. The local paper wants to interview you. Hero father exposes criminal in-laws to save daughter. Interested? I looked at Margaret's photo on the mantel, then at the family albums scattered across the coffee table. No, Stephen, some victories don't need publicity. I hung up and returned to my photo albums. In a few weeks, Emily would have her honest wedding blessing. Simple, modest, real. Everything the Thompsons' extravaganza wasn't. Outside, spring was turning to summer in Spokane, the season of new beginnings. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Thank you for loving me enough to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. I smiled and set the phone aside. Justice had been served. My daughter was safe, and sometimes that's exactly enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.